The dramatic news from our colleagues across town at CBS News who have been going through the bottomlands. CBS News is under a transformation that is driven by the President of the United States, by corporate interests that want federal approval for a big merger, a big consolidation in the media and news business. In order to do that, and maybe because they want to otherwise, they have been essentially bulldozing one of the great news organizations, news brands in American history, CBS News, the home of, among other things, 60 Minutes, the most successful American news program ever. The veteran correspondent at 60 Minutes, Scott Pelley, the most recognizable person on 60 Minutes, the former host of CBS's network news show, and one of the most respected journalists in America. Scott Pelley has been fired by CBS News tonight after a widely reported staff meeting confrontation with the new leadership that was brought in essentially from the classified ads to come run 60 Minutes. Scott Pelley confronting that new leadership about the changes that have happened at CBS News under the new leadership, under the new management, the sort of oligarchic takeover of that news organization, and now the news tonight that he has been fired. Scott Pelley has put out a statement tonight, just in the last few minutes, in response to being fired. I would read it to you, but listen to me. I sound like I've been gargling with steel wool. Luckily, Jen Psaki is here and is going to read the statement.
I'm going to be your spokesperson, sort of. Yeah. This is incredibly powerful. We were just talking during the break about everybody needs to hear every word, so I'm just going to read every single word so that the audience hears it. It starts this way. There's never been anything in America like 60 Minutes. The Sunday tradition is the most successful program of any kind in history. For more than a decade, its innovative growth on every major online platform has extended its reach to countless millions around the world. This spring, at the end of our 58th season, 60 Minutes grew rapidly with an unheard of 9% jump in viewers on CBS. 60 has been the #1 program in America for decades because our beloved audience finds integrity, quality, and humanity in our stories. When stewardship of the program passed to my colleagues and me, our responsibility was to expand energetically into a new age of media technology while preserving the values our audience expects. Now, the new owner of our network is casting this legend aside, apparently to curry a moment of favor with the Trump administration. The waste is heartbreaking. Last month, 60 Minutes lost its DNA when our entire senior leadership and 2 of our best on-air correspondents were cruelly fired without cause. Good people were silenced because they stood up for our audience. They stood for fairness against the forces of political bias. They stood for professionalism against chaos. For my part, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story.
Wow.
Oof. I've been told, these are just incredible words to hear from Scott Pelley.
One more time?
Yeah, just read that
For my
again.
part, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. This is similar to what Cecilia Vega also had in her statement just last week. He goes on to say, I've been told to include assertions that are unverified.
Wow.
To date, in every case, I have managed to ignore these instructions or refuse them. Recently, politicians have been invited to choose correspondents for interviews on the broadcast. Giving politicians control over 60 Minutes interviews is not how this is done. Finally, incompetence and unprofessionalism in the new management have wreaked havoc. In a case involving one of my stories, the entire program came within 19 minutes of not getting on the air at all.
Wow.
This is 60 Minutes. I mean, 9 million people, I believe, were watching as of last.
And a financial powerhouse.
A financial powerhouse. At 60 Minutes, we have fought harder than anyone knows to save the program that became an American icon. We owed that to our millions of viewers. I am deeply moved by the thousands of wishes we have received to keep up the good fight. Most of the men and women of CBS News are still in that fight, but now the collapse of values at the top has become untenable. The leadership of 60 Minutes is no longer recognizable. The principles I hold dear are gone, and so I must leave as well. I depart after 37 years at CBS. With one emotion, a heart brimming with gratitude for the men and women at CBS News who encouraged and enriched my work, very often at the risk of their own lives. I pray for a day when those people and their ideals are honored again, a day when sanity, competence, and courage return.
Wow.
How does the rest of CBS News come to work tomorrow.
How does
Say, let's do
How does
it.
the rest of 60 Minutes come to work? And how do the correspondents who are still there feel?
And how do the people who are doing this look themselves in the mirror?
Fine. Let me be clear.
They're good.
They're A-okay.
They're good.
We
They
talked
are
about this
good.
during the break. I would liken this. This is the equivalent.
They're good.
They're doging CBS, right? Elon Musk came into the government not understanding how the government worked and bulldozed it. Realized after mistakes, and just left a wasteland. Hated the government he was tearing apart, and there was no evidence that they wanted to rebuild it. That's what we're witnessing here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also this question that you encounter time and time again in this era in a variety of contexts and institutions, which is when to stay and when to go. And what do you do with, like, if you work at the Department of Justice, right? And you're a civil servant who believes in upholding the law. How long can you hold on at the Department of Justice in the Trump administration? How long, what is the line? When's the moment when you get the thing from the boss that says, go do this thing that's over the line? And that set of ethical decisions that people had to make under these intense contexts of pressure get repeated over and over and over across the institutions that the current administration is trying to destroy.
Can I just make an argument, though? Whenever we look at those organizations and say, how could people stay? Why aren't they quitting? And we've said this about newspapers and television. These are people's jobs.
No, totally.
Right? These are their lives.
No, and I mean it. I'm not saying how could people. I'm saying I'm saying there are people right now watching this program who work at the Department of Justice who are like good people with great values who believe in justice. There are people who are watching this program right now who work in the FBI or in the intelligence, one of the 18 intelligence agencies that are apparently going to get helmed by Bill Pulte. I mean, across the board, there are folks that are embedded in institutions that are attempting to that sort of nefarious forces of corruption are trying to co-opt or destroy, and have to make evaluations about how they are going to.
I will say one piece of that is when you do decide you have to go. I don't envy anybody.
You got to do it that way.
You have to do it this way.
You got to do it that way.
You have to say why you went.
Yes.
And you have to say what you saw.
Yeah.
And whether you were pushed out or whether you left on your own terms, if it is time to go, I can tell you categorically, the patriotic thing to do is to tell what you know.
Here is the thing that I'm focusing on when I look at the CBS story. Scott Pelley is, as you described, just this figure in this time. But there's a new generation of journalists who are coming out of journalism schools and that are coming out of local broadcast and media situations looking to begin this trek. And what struck me in everything that Scott Pelley said was this: new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. I've been told to include assertions that are unverified. If you are a 27-year-old newly minted journalist who's starting that track, this is what's so dangerous and corruptive and so poisonous about this administration and what they've been doing, is that they're not worried about the past and the things in the present. They want to transform, terraform the future. And in this space, in the media space, if I got a young kid and I'm telling him, no, you're going to put this in paragraph 27.
Okay, but here's what you're
What's
forgetting.
he going to do?
Last Wednesday was the Emmys. And at the Emmys, and we saw 60 Minutes win multiple Emmys, a young man was given the Mike Wallace Award, right? He works, CBS gave him this award, and he got up there. He's not older than 25 years old, right? And he spoke out against this organization that is now being controlled by corporate interests and standing in the way of the truth. So I hear exactly what you're saying, but it also gives me such faith when you watch these extraordinary young people, right?
But that's exactly the point I'm getting to. How do they respond? And if he's the example of that response, then what you just said, Rachel, about that moment when you have to come to truth with yourself, they can write this letter.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can write this letter.
Yeah. Jen.
I was just going to say, I want to call some preemptive BS on what we're going to hear from the right, which is that, anybody that's Scott Pelley, that Cecilia Vega are products of the left, that they are defending Democrats. And I'm just going to say, I worked for 2 Democratic presidents who were interviewed by them. I was grilled by some of them every single day. I had no idea what their politics were. They were tough as nails on every single person I worked for, they called out things that they didn't think should be happening in government. That's who they were.
Yeah.
So anybody who calls that out is total BS. And I can tell you from experience.
Yeah. And I would also say that, Scott Pelley, if you're watching, come work for us. I actually don't have the power to hire you.
I'm sure you do. If anyone here does.
You have the voice.
But if MS takes a vote, we all vote yes.
We all vote.
That is not the only breaking news that we are following tonight, just in the past hour. The storied, venerable journalist and 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley has tonight been fired by the newly revamped CBS News. Yesterday, Mr. Pelley reportedly lambasted the new leadership at 60 Minutes and at CBS for effectively killing the long-running news magazine after firing scores of staff members and its leadership, and after accusations of meddling in the show's editorial process. For that, directly as a result of that confrontation at a staff meeting, Mr. Pelley appears to have been fired by the network for cause. MS now has obtained the letter sent to Mr. Pelley this evening from the newly appointed executive producer at 60 Minutes. He's just been installed there as part of the sort of bald-faced Hungarian-style oligarchic takeover of that news organization. This newly appointed executive wrote to Scott Pelley, and the imbalance in terms of journalistic experience there is remarkable, given what the contents of the letter is. The contents of the letter are. The letter says, in part, to Scott Pelley, quote, "Yesterday you hijacked my first meeting with staff to disparage me, my qualifications, and my intentions with remarkable incivility and contempt." The letter from the newly appointed executive producer goes on to say that Mr. Pelley was terminated for cause, effective immediately. On the free press part of this, I made a crack there talking about the Scott Pelley news as being sort of a Hungarian oligarchic-style takeover of the media, and I mean that sort of as a joke, but also sort of deadly serious. I mean, there's nobody who is more acutely attuned to the value of a free press than those who are trying to take it away. And when the president baldly says, I am going to use the power of the state in order to get the media that I want, and he lines up oligarchic friends in order to do that for him, again, there's no pretense. There's no saying this is for any other reason. There's nothing else going on at CBS News other than what we can see is happening at CBS News. And I don't know where Scott Pelley will land. Frankly, I hope he lands right here. Yeah. I hope he stays on. I hope he's on TV tomorrow. Right. And I hope that everybody in journalism and everybody who values a free press figures out ways to outmaneuver the people who are trying to take the free press from us. But it is a fully joined fight at this point, and there's no. I just don't think there's any. I think any pretense that anything else was happening here is over.
Yeah. I take Cecilia Vega, who recently departed 60 Minutes, at her word when she says that her experience in that newsroom was one of censorship. I take her at her word when she says that in her stories they were trying to inject political bias. So I am with you 100% on the fact that there is nothing to litigate here. It is very clear what they are doing. The mandate for Barry Weiss is not excellent journalism or editorial discretion or to turn this into a new product. No, it's to grease the wheels for her corporate overlords. And let's be honest, stars across the board when it comes to that objective. I do want to make sure to tie this in, though, to the Sotomayor dissent that you read, because I'm taken by her frame that this is a two roads diverged moment. Yeah. And that the court could have chosen not to go in the direction of chaos, but they distinctly chose chaos because in this moment, chaos is the point. And where I think that ties into the elections that we're all watching tonight is you have Democratic voters going out there and saying, I can't deal with the chaos anymore. Donald Trump campaigned on this idea that he was going to make America safe and secure and he was going to get rid of the chaos. It has been nothing but chaos. And so they are trying to figure out who is the fighter who can actually win in any of these number of races, who can restore order that is being dismantled at every stage of our government.
Longtime 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley's evisceration of his MAGA-friendly bosses at CBS News is the media story that continues to reverberate around politics and media today. It's led to growing questions among CBS News and 60 Minutes staffers about Scott Pelley's future at the network, as well as what path forward 60 Minutes will take. It was on top. Where's it going now? It has, for decades, been the gold standard in broadcast journalism, a critical and commercial success, the rarest of things, a unicorn, if you will. But importantly, how did we get to this moment? Well, it started with CBS caving to Donald Trump after he sued the network over a 60 Minutes interview he didn't like with Kamala Harris. Paramount, the parent company of CBS, wound up paying Trump $16 million to settle. But before that settlement, CBS News pushed out Bill Owens, the longtime executive producer of 60 Minutes. Last night, that person, Bill Owens, accepted an award at the New York Press Club. Owens reacted to what had happened earlier in the day at 60 Minutes by saying this, quote, Scott Pelley can smell a fraud a mile away. He stood up the way I did a year ago, and I couldn't be prouder of him, and I know all the people at 60 Minutes couldn't be prouder of him. CBS News and 60 Minutes are institutions, not places where partisans and ideologues should be employed, end quote. Wow. Back with me at the table, Oliver Darcy. He has been the reporter on this story about the revolt within 60 Minutes for his newsletter Status. Bill Owens, take me inside why this matters and tell people who he is.
Yeah, I mean, he is a veteran CBS News journalist. I believe he worked for CBS News for 3 decades plus. This is someone who's considered to be a very serious journalist, not someone who usually goes out and makes these remarks. He certainly doesn't talk
Won't say anything, doesn't say much of anything, doesn't inject himself into these cycles.
Exactly. And so for him to go out there and to say, you know, that Barry Weiss is murdering 60 Minutes or killing 60 Minutes, and then to go and talk about CBS News and how an ideologue is now running this network and how it's not a place for partisans to be running, you know, they shouldn't be running this network, is remarkable. And then to support Scott, obviously, he's close with Scott, so he obviously did support Scott. But again, this adds to the growing backlash that CBS News is facing. It's not outside critics who are saying that Barry Weiss is incompetent and shouldn't be in charge of the network. It's people who worked there their entire lives, right? It's Scott Pelley. It's Bill Owens. It's Cecilia Vega, although she was a little newer hire. But these are people largely that worked for CBS News. They were on the CBS News payroll. Anderson Cooper. These are not names that typically like to interject themselves into the public discussion. And when they do, they certainly think very carefully about what they say.
So what happens next?
I think that's the open question. It's what happens with Scott Pelley, right? And it's hard to imagine that he's going to be at the network long term. I mean, I just have a hard time imagining after hearing his remarks yesterday. Like he is, it seems that.
And you listened to it, right?
I listened
had
to the audio,
to the audio,
yeah. And I mean, it's hard to imagine that he's going to be working with Barry Weiss and Nick Bilton in the foreseeable future. And so the question is, what happens to 60 Minutes? You already lost Anderson Cooper as a correspondent. You fired Sharon Alfonsi. You fired Cecilia Vega. Theoretically, Scott's not going to be there. So you're down 4 major correspondents. And there are open questions about Bill Whitaker and Leslie Stahl, whether they're going to stay. And so it's like this show is crumbling before our eyes. It's hard to imagine. I was talking to people earlier inside the show, and they're not sure, you know, necessarily whether they can make the air in the fall because they don't even know which correspondents are going to be doing packages. So Donald Trump is getting what he wants, which is he wanted to muzzle this program. He wanted to suffocate it, and he's getting it. And, you know, it's, again, there's a lot of dots to connect, and your audience, I'm sure, has connected them.
Well, and what's interesting is we do what we do, right, for the viewers. And you could make a business argument that the other programs could do better by their viewers, right? You could have more viewers for the CBS Evening News. I think it's come in third for years. Mm-hmm. I don't know as much about the morning show, but I think it also comes in third often. You cannot make a business argument about 60 Minutes. It's the top of the top. It sits atop everything else that has ever come along and tried to do what it does, which is compelling journalism on television. What is, to your point, that there's nothing left, I mean, what do all of those people go and do? Do they go form something on their own outside of CBS?
I'm not sure. This is a problem we're seeing across the journalism community. You know, the Washington Post was, Jeff Bezos let that paper flail, and a lot of journalists left to go to other outlets. But I think your point, too, about 60 Minutes is so important. It's not even that they were averaging over 9 million viewers every single Sunday, which is the highest rated television news program, right? But also on digital. They were doing very well on digital. In fact, less than 2 weeks ago, they put out a press release bragging about how well they did on digital this season. I think that over 2.5 billion video views across their social platforms. Wow. They said they were up over 180% year over year. And this is sort of the rationale that Bari Weiss and her deputies are using for overhauling this network. Like, yes, we understand linear was strong, but we want to be strong on digital where the future is. Well, you just fired the people that led you to the biggest digital season you've ever had on record. I mean, 60 Minutes is the rare exception, actually, in television news where they're doing really well on digital. People go to YouTube to watch these 60 Minutes pieces. They watch them on TikTok. So, there's no business justification for overhauling this program. As the old saying goes, don't fix it if it's not broken.
And this wasn't even just not broken. I mean, this was thriving. This was the best of the best.
Yeah, this is like you have a Lamborghini in your garage, and it's a very fast car, and everyone envies that car and wishes it was in their garage, and then saying, I'm going to disassemble the whole thing and take apart the engine. And you wouldn't do that. It makes no sense.
But the Lamborghini thing is, it's like a Lamborghini that's also comfortable. Like, this was a thing that was watchable and successful. I want to ask you what happens to Bari Weiss and if David Ellison is just so politically obsessed that he doesn't care about all this failure.
As far as I can tell, David Ellison's backing her 100%. He must have known.
Out of what? Out of just...
I mean, he must have known. He surely has people around him who would tell him that if Bari Weiss does this to 60 Minutes, there's going to be significant backlash. And he allowed her to do this. Make no mistake, she reports to David Ellison directly. And so there's no world in which any of this is happening without David Ellison's explicit approval. And, he's the one that brought her in. He paid $150-some million to hire Bari Weiss and to acquire her anti-woke outlet, the Free Press. He paid a lot of money to have her in charge of CBS News. It's not like a regular hire where she's getting paid a few $1 million a year salary. He paid $150 million-ish to bring her on board. So he's sticking with her for now. I don't know how this is sustainable long term, but if you don't care about the actual news division and you want to just get a business deal done, which is what he wants, maybe it doesn't matter.
What's amazing, though, is that he obviously doesn't care about excellence or elegance or competence or brilliance, because that's what 60 Minutes was. It was excellent, it was elegant, it was brilliant, and it was wildly commercially successful.
And he's going to go down in history with this huge stain on his legacy, that he is the one who allowed 60 Minutes to be shattered. At the time we really need it most, when authoritarianism is almost, it's on the rise in this country. So.
But forget about, he's put himself on the anti-democracy side over and over again, but he also just looks like a schmo. Like, he just looks like a guy that does dumb things it just looks like a guy that crashes cars for fun or drops Legos, child that drops Legos off the kitchen counter to watch them break. Doesn't look particularly enlightened.
He doesn't look very savvy. It's not like there's some grand strategy that seems like it's not even like they hired someone to lead 60 Minutes who is like super savvy, almost like a Roger Ailes.
3D chess.
Like, this isn't Roger Ailes they brought in, who's like, you can very much disagree with the politics and what he's done to the public discussion at Fox News. But Roger Ailes is a pretty smart guy, and a guy who knew how to run a network.
This is not that.
This is a lot of self-inflicted mistakes over and over and over again. And, you're just watching it play out. It's like everyone's watching this fire from the west side of Manhattan.